In this video, I'm going to talk about what is beyond a reasonable doubt. What does it mean? This is the burden of proof in every criminal case, and it comes up in every criminal case. The problem with beyond a reasonable doubt is that lawyers aren't allowed to define it for a jury, which just simply doesn't make a lot of sense. In every single criminal case, I just told you this is the burden of proof, and it comes up in every criminal case, yet lawyers are not allowed to explain it to a jury. So how I do it, or how I don't explain it, is I talk about all of the other burdens of proof. I'm going to use this to illustrate to you at least, maybe not exactly what beyond a reasonable doubt means, but it will provide you a stair-step so you understand the lower burdens of proof so that you realize how high beyond a reasonable doubt really is. I do this every time I do voir dire in a criminal case. I will get everybody together on the panel and I will start asking questions. First question I generally ask is, juror number 5. Let's say that you were leaving the courthouse today and you were getting pulled over in front of your work on your way back to the office, and everybody was looking out the window. How much proof would you want the officer to have before he could pull you over right in front of your office and embarrass you? And most people, juror number 5 would generally say, well, I'd want the person to have a lot of proof. I'd want the officer to be pretty certain that I did something wrong. And then I'll tell the jury, well, that is the burden of proof called reasonable grounds. It just means there's some proof. The amount of proof that an officer has to have before they can pull you over on the side of the road in front of your house or your work and embarrass you. People are generally kind of surprised by that, but they accept it. The second question I'll ask is juror number 2. Let's say you leave here, you go to your office, and the cops think that you've violated the law. So they want to come into your office and they want to arrest you in front of every coworker you've ever worked with. How much proof would you want that officer to have before they arrested you in front of your coworkers? Usually the jurors will say something to the effect of, I'd want the officer to be really sure. I think that could cost me my job. They better be really sure. Like a lot of proof. And then I'll tell the person, well, that's just probable cause. That's the standard of proof called probable cause. It's the second lowest standard of proof recognized in the legal system. And then I'll ask another juror, I'll say, okay, juror number 10, and let's say you get in a lawsuit. You hit your neighbor's car and he wants to sue you for $1 million. And how sure would you want the jury in that case to be before they could take $1 million out of your bank account and put it in your neighbor's bank account? And almost every juror will say, oh, it's got to be virtually 100%. You know, $1 million, they're going to take $1 million from me. They better be really, really sure that I've done something wrong. And then I'll tell the jury, well, that's just more likely than not. That's the civil standard in a lawsuit, just more likely than not. So 50.1%, more probable than not probable. And everybody's kind of shocked. And then I usually wait to find somebody that I have looked at their jury questionnaire and see that they have children. And I'll say, okay, juror number 2, you have some children. You're aware that an arm of the state that will take people's children away if they don't feel like they are being appropriately raised or that the kids are in danger or something like that. Jurors will generally say, yeah, I've heard of that before. And then I'll ask them, okay, before the state could come in and take your children away, they wanted to take your children, remove them and put them in foster care. How sure would you want the state to be that you are an unfit parent before they would come in and take your children away? And almost everyone says, well, they've got to be 100%. There's just absolutely zero possibility that I'm not an unfit parent before they can come in and take those children. And then I'll tell them, that's a burden called clear and convincing evidence. That's the second highest burden of proof recognized in the legal system. And then I'll tell them, okay, so we went through these different burdens. We've went reasonable grounds, we've went probable cause, more likely than not or more probable than not, clear and convincing. Now we're at the top. The top is beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the burden that is applicable in the criminal justice system when you're deciding whether someone has broken the law or hasn't. You have to be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt every single element of the offense. Now, I know I haven't specifically answered beyond a reasonable doubt and what it really means, but I think I've laid it out in a way that you can understand how high the burden of proof is when you compare it to all of the other burdens of proof recognized in the legal system.